Thank you, Lutfi, and hello, everybody. My name is Scott Weber. I'm the Director General of Interpeace, and a friend of Lutfi's and a number of you in the room. Very pleased to be here on this very topical issue. I'm going to talk to you about the principles of peace building. Now, to put it in context, 1.5 billion people today live in situations of conflict. We are facing the worst humanitarian crisis since the Second World War. But when you break down the numbers, 80% of the crises that we're facing are conflict-related. Only 20% relate to natural disasters. More troubling, though, than that, is that 2/3 of those crisis situations are in protracted conflicts of 8 years or more. Now, the key question we should be asking ourselves is not how do we respond better to those crises, but rather why aren't we resolving them in the first place? Why aren't we preventing more of these violent conflicts in the first place? In international affairs, we're much better at stopping wars than we are at building peace. 60%, in fact, of peace processes fall apart within the first 5 years, and it's closer to 80% within the first 10 years. Now, what is it? Do we not know how to build peace? Are we not applying the lessons of what we've learned? I would argue that we do know how to build peace, we're just not applying those lessons. In the words of a former UN colleague, and to paraphrase for this, he said that in international affairs and in conflict resolution, no wheel shall go unreinvented. And it's the fact that we don't apply what we already know. But we have to start by actually changing our notion of conflict. I was very pleased with the title of the event that included constructive conflict. Because conflict is natural to any society. Conflict is a confrontation of interests. It's a confrontation of ideas. In our societies, in the UK, for example, you have mechanisms and institutions, be they formal or informal, to deal with those conflicts, to manage them in non-violent ways. Many countries around the world either don't have those institutions, or they're too weak, or they're not trusted. So the real task of peace building, and in fact the definition of peace building, is not to prevent conflict. Building peace is not about preventing conflict. Building peace is fundamentally about building trust. It's about strengthening the capacities in society to manage conflict in nonviolent ways. So we don't try to do away with conflict. We try to manage it in nonviolent ways. Now, building peace, as I said, is about building trust. The first thing to be destroyed in a conflict is trust, and it's the last thing to be rebuilt. When we say trust, we mean social trust between different groups in society, and issues of tolerance and acceptance are central to that, but also trust between the people and their authorities. Now, the beautiful thing about trust is I can't force you to trust me. You have to willingly give me your trust. And so the best I can do is actually to act in a trustworthy manner. In Kinyarwanda, the language of Rwanda, they have a saying that is that we can't trust each other if we don't sweat together. We actually have to try to do something together, build something together to start trusting each other. And what we see in conflict zones where no one trusts anyone, where one group thinks the problem that divides them is A, the other group thinks the problem that divides them is B, if they can't agree on what is dividing them, they can't work together towards a solution. You have to own the problem if you want to start working on the solution. So often the starting point in peace building is to get groups to agree first on what the problem is that divides them. Then they can start the path of building trust with each other. The second lesson is that peace has to be inclusive. Most of the conflicts that we deal with, we work in 22 different conflict zones around the world. Most of them can trace their origins back in one way or another to some form of political, social, or economic exclusion, and a sense of injustice that comes from that. We worked on the truce between the youth gangs of El Salvador. El Salvador was the second most dangerous country in the world after Syria. We negotiated a truce between these youth gangs. It brought the murders down by 60% in the country. It went from number 2 most dangerous country in the world to number 44 for 2.5 years. I went to visit one of the gang leaders in a prison to ask him about why he is remaining committed to the truce, how he sees the future of the gang, etc. And he told me that the gang exists largely because society has failed. The gang represents something positive also for youth in society. It gives them a sense of belonging, a sense of dignity, an opportunity for social advancement, which is what young people are looking for all around the world. Exclusion is tearing our societies apart. I'm not going to use the T word. I used it. 10 pounds. But across Europe, we're seeing this, across the US, but these are the same issues that I deal with in the most fragile states in the world. And therefore, I think we need to put extra emphasis on creating more inclusive societies all around the world, not just in the most fragile ones. Now, the most excluded groups in society are youth and women. Now, the problem is that you can, as we are slowly learning, with time you stop being a youth, but you don't stop being a woman. So the fundamental challenge, I believe, is actually women's full participation in society. The third lesson is that peace cannot be imposed nor imported into a country. It has to come from within. The people of that society have to be the ones to come to those solutions themselves. And the sense of ownership is central to that. I can't force someone to change. They have to want to change. I can't walk into someone's house and tell them how to raise their children. They'd kick us out of the house. They have to come to their own conclusions about how they can raise their children better. And the same thing applies for peace. We too often come with our own ideas of what a society needs, rather than listening to them and what their aspirations are for their own future. Now, I would like to end with a message of hope, because we are all bombarded in the media and in our conversations today. I just got back from Washington. Washington feels like it's a morgue right now of depression. I think we have to recognize where things are going right. In conflict resolution, we do a lot of work to do what we call conflict mapping, to look at where are things burning and why, who hates who owes who money, why are they fighting, etc., to try to resolve those violent conflicts. What we've started to do, which is applying a very innovative approach, I believe, is what we call peace mapping. It's to look in a society that's fragile, in a society that's divided, where is it working? Where are things not burning and why? What can we learn from a village that did not fall to extremists next to the one that did? Peace mapping is actually teaching us more about how we can help societies build a greater inclusion and greater peace than looking at the parts that are actually in conflict. There's a question from the audience. But just to say that we don't have to look very far to find the sources of hope and aspiration. What we need to look at and ask ourselves the question in our own societies: why aren't things worse? What are the sources of resilience that are binding us together as a society? Because those are the factors that we need to use to build upon and to address the issues of exclusion in our own societies. Thank you very much.